You're standing in the self-checkout line at a local grocery store on a rainy Tuesday night around 8:42 p.m. holding a cheap plastic basket. Inside, you got a bag of store-brand oats, 2 cans of black beans, and a $5 bag of frozen broccoli. The guy behind you is incredibly impatient, shifting his weight from one foot to the other and sighing loudly. He glances at your beat-up sneakers, your faded gray hoodie with the slightly frayed cuff, and the $12 worth of cheap groceries in your basket. In half a second, his brain decides exactly what you are, labeling you as just another broke person struggling to get by in an expensive city. But he's completely wrong. In your back pocket is an ordinary smartphone, and on that phone is an app displaying a balance sheet that most people will never see in their entire lives. It's a solid 7-figure number that's been sitting there for 3 years, and you've never once said it out loud to another human soul. You are not broke, you are entirely free, and the difference took you 28 years and one quiet decision that nobody ever noticed you make. You did not win a lottery, you did not sell a tech startup, and you did not inherit a fortune. You simply walked out of the modern rat race through a door that is always left wide open, and not a single person watched you leave. The journey to that grocery store line started when you were 23, waking up at 6 in the morning before your alarm could even go off, staring at the textured ceiling of a cheap one-bedroom apartment. You split the rent with a roommate named Dave in a working-class suburb where every single house looked exactly the same. You were making $41,000 a year at an entry-level job, and after taxes, the $1,300 rent, and the minimum student loan payments, you had almost nothing left. Your money came in on the 1st and the 15th of the month, and by the 14th and the 30th, it was completely gone. You felt like you were running as fast as you could on a treadmill just to stay in the exact same place. Your mom would call you every single Sunday from her small apartment, having retired after 30 years of working at a regional bank with only $61,000 in savings. Because her resources were so tight, she counted her monthly expenses down to the penny and constantly warned you to be careful with your money. She never actually told you what being careful looked like, because nobody had ever shown her how the wealth machine worked. But you loved her and quietly resolved not to end up in the same financial trap. At your office, a coworker named Brad had just leased a brand new Dodge Charger and spent an entire week talking about the exhaust note and the premium sound system. His lease payment was over $600 a month, which meant more than $7,000 of his hard-earned cash evaporated into thin air every single year just so he could feel important. Everyone in the break room crowded around him, telling him how incredible his new ride was, while you commuted in a 2008 Honda Civic with 141,000 miles on the odometer and a cup holder held together with duct tape. You sat in the corner, drank your cheap office coffee, and said absolutely nothing. The thing that Brad and everyone else in that break room did not understand is that the consumer treadmill does not care how fast you run, and if you let your spending match your earnings, you're just accelerating the belt. Most people run on it for 40 years, upgrading their cars and apartments along the way, and call it a successful life. One night, around midnight, you decided to do something very quiet and opened a brokerage account on your phone, transferring $300 into a low-cost, broad-market index fund. You did this not because you were a financial genius, but because you were simply tired of feeling trapped. You wrote down a single calculated target number on a plain white index card, went to the local library the next day, and laminated it for 40 cents so it would fit behind your driver's license. You told absolutely no one about your plan, keeping the secret from Dave, Brad, and your mom, while keeping the old Civic on the road and buying the cheap broccoli. The $300 felt like a drop of water in a massive canyon, but you set the transfer to repeat automatically on the 2nd of every month, so the decision was made once and never again. The exit door was completely invisible to everyone else on the treadmill, and they had no idea you were already starting to walk toward it. By the time you turned 27, you had worked hard and earned a promotion, bringing your salary up to $58,000 a year, but you made the unusual choice to keep living like you still made $41,000. The raise never reached your daily life because you funneled every single extra dollar straight into your investment account before you even had a chance to see it in your checking balance. This is the power of protecting the gap, which is the crucial space between what you earn and what you spend, and it is a space that almost nobody in modern society respects. The moment most people get a raise, they buy a nicer apartment, lease a newer car, or spend their weekends at expensive bars, closing the gap the very second it opens. You did the opposite, investing $700 a month and watching your balance climb past $24,000. It did not feel like freedom yet, but rather like a very slow process where the market would sometimes drop and you would watch your balance fall by $1,500 in a single weekend. You felt the old panic rising in your chest, but you chose to do the hardest thing in investing, which is to do absolutely nothing. You kept the automatic transfers running, buying more shares when they were cheap, the same way you buy groceries when they are on sale. That summer, your roommate Dave got engaged and bought a diamond ring for nearly $10,000 on a 4-year retail payment plan. You did not tell him how much that same $10,000 would grow to if left to compound in an index fund for 40 years, because pointing out the math of consumer debt to a happy friend is just rude. So you toasted him with a cheap beer and kept the numbers to yourself. At backyard barbecues, people would ask you how you were doing financially, and you would just shrug and say you were getting by, which they believed instantly because your worn sneakers and old Civic did all the lying for you. When you caught your reflection in a window, you looked no different than you did years ago, but the target number on your laminated card was starting to look less like a dream and more like a real destination. You reached 33 years of age on a quiet Thursday evening while your partner, Sarah, was asleep on your shoulder, and you opened your phone to find that your account balance read $103,540. You did not celebrate or post a screenshot online, but instead sat there in the quiet room and felt a massive shift because reaching your first 6-figure milestone is the strangest and most important part of the journey. For 9 years, you would push this heavy financial snowball uphill completely by hand, saving small amounts and slowly increasing them as your income grew. But now the hill was starting to push back. At a standard 7% return, a $100,000 portfolio grows by about $7,000 a year without you doing a single second of extra work, which means the machine has started to run on its own fuel, and you are no longer the only engine working to build your future. If you invest just $200 a month at an average 8% return, how many years do you think it takes to cross your first $100,000? Write your guess in the comments right now, and let's see who gets the math closest. Your coworkers assumed you must be struggling because you brought your lunch in the same dented container every day and drove the same old Civic, which now had nearly 200,000 miles on it, and a check engine light you had jokingly named Gerald. You let them think whatever they wanted because their assumptions were your camouflage, and camouflage protects your peace of mind. An older coworker named Arthur retired that spring, and at his farewell lunch, he pulled you aside near the elevator to tell you that he spent 30 years earning and would spend the rest of his life wishing he had kept more of it. That night, you wrote his words on the back of your laminated card and showed Sarah the real investment balance for the first time, watching her look at the screen in silence before realizing that you finally had a real choice in life. By the age of 40, your daughter Leo was 3 years old, and your portfolio had grown to approximately $371,000 as the compounding engine began adding more money to your account every year than you could physically contribute from your salary. While your monthly contribution of $1,800 was significant, the growth on your portfolio was now doing the heavy lifting, earning money while you slept, while you played with your son, and while your old Civic sat parked outside. This phase of your life had absolutely no drama, no sudden financial windfalls, and no high-risk trades, but was simply a number quietly doubling itself in the background over and over again like a silent tide coming in while no one was watching. You still bought the $5 broccoli and lived simply, not to save a few pennies, but to keep the discipline of knowing how much was enough for a happy life. Your sister bought a massive house with a crushing monthly mortgage and told you to stop renting, but you and Sarah continued to live in a comfortable, modest rental home near a green park and said nothing, letting her believe she was winning the social game. You took your son Leo to the same public library where you laminated your card years ago to help him pick out books, knowing that true wealth is a silent language that you were now completely fluent in. You were 45 years old when your father had a sudden health scare, and while waiting in your car outside the hospital, you did the math of his life and realized he had worked for 43 years but had no financial buffer, leaving his retirement entirely dependent on his physical health holding up. Your own investment balance had crossed $697,000 this year, which meant that at a highly conservative 4% safe withdrawal rate, your assets could safely generate about $27,900 a year without ever touching the core savings. Since your family's annual living expenses were around $42,000, your portfolio was now paying for more than half of your entire life, marking the quietest turning point a human life can have. You drove your father home from the hospital in his old vehicle, and when he looked out the window and said he wished he had started saving at your age, you simply reached over, squeezed his hand, and kept your eyes on the road. When you turned 49, you sat in an ordinary corporate meeting listening to your boss raise his voice about a minor mistake on a spreadsheet, and you realized you felt absolutely no anxiety because your account balance had officially crossed $1,062,000. At a 4% safe withdrawal rate, your investments now generated enough money to cover your entire family's modest, comfortable lifestyle forever, meaning you had hit your life's ultimate goal during a mundane office meeting. Having the option to walk away completely changed how you carried yourself, your posture, and the depth of your breath, allowing you to politely decline extra weekend work because you no longer had to negotiate for your survival. Brad, the coworker who had leased the Dodge Charger decades ago, had gone through 6 different cars since then, but had almost nothing saved and was constantly stressed about his job security, even telling you that you should really think about your career advancement while you just smiled and finished your tea. You did not quit your job immediately because you actually enjoyed the work when you were not forced to do it, but you commuted in a simple, reliable SUV that you bought with cash, and when your son Leo asked if your family was rich, you told him that you simply had enough. Now, at 52 years old, you pour a fresh cup of coffee in a comfortable house that is fully paid for in cash, costing far less than the heavily mortgaged homes your friends bought to show off. Your investment balance is now $1.44 million, and because the portfolio generates more money than you actually spend, the extra wealth just gets automatically reinvested, and the whole system keeps growing without you. You stepped off the consumer wheel years ago, and the noise of the crowd running on it is just a distant memory. You walk back into the same grocery store where your journey started, and stand in the self-checkout line with a basket of basic food, letting the busy people behind you assume whatever they want while you enjoy your quiet camouflage. Your peers spent decades buying things they did not need to impress people they did not like, but you protected your margin, fed your investment engine, and let the world leave you alone while you quietly bought back your freedom. Your mother lives with you now and still tells you to be careful with your money every single week, and you just pour her a warm cup of coffee and let her be right. You take your son Leo to the local library, hand him a clean white index card and a pen, and tell him to write down the single number that means he will never have to run on anyone else's schedule, laminating it for 40 cents and sliding it behind his library card. The struggle for financial freedom does not end with a loud celebration, but on a quiet afternoon when you realize you have stepped off the track and realize that absolutely nobody is chasing you. If this story made you think differently about your money, your career, and what it actually means to be free, please do me a quick favor and take a second to hit that subscribe button right now. On this channel, we share honest, practical, and real-life stories about how to build true wealth and escape the daily grind without all the fake hype. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end, and I will see you in the very next video.